Well, I wanted to go back to the question you asked me before about
Please, Mark.
Whether there's a moral side, and there clearly is. It's clear that when you read these papers, they think peace is good. I'm not critical of it. I'm simply saying it comes through in the text. But one of the things that might be added conceptually is if peace is so damn good, and if we get 28 trillion, whatever, a big amount of money every year by just being peaceful, why haven't we done this already? Are we really just stupid? And I think part of the answer is there are a lot of incentives for conflict, violence, and war that are kind of not here. Some of them are. The export of arms suggests why countries with big arms industries, including a place like Sweden, a small country that's actually seen as pretty peaceful, engage in producing and exporting arms. The traffic in small arms. We can go on and on about what the incentives are, let alone looking at resource-rich places and the control of them. So in the story of conflict and why it does occur, but why it doesn't occur, which is here, that would be useful to get at.
Very good. Thank you.
And one of the things that is interesting, I think, from a peacekeeping perspective, is that we're always in, or we should always be in the immediate post-conflict little strata, right? So we're actually like a really small sliver of it. We're just this bridge to other bigger and better things, because that's what we should be. And in that moment, the most important thing is, incentivizing is one way of phrasing it, but for us, it's really this leverage, right? And it's positive leverage and it's negative leverage.
Yeah.
And that always comes down to, again, this question of political will. However we place political will in it. Because getting the states that can actually act in that equation to do so means that you're asking them to spend political capital, which is not as easily replenishable as just economic capital or arms or anything else like that. But that's actually really hard to get China to make a phone call. You can do it. You can get China to call, I don't know, Khartoum and say, don't do that anymore. But if you do that, then here are the 4 other things that China puts on the table as the cost of that call. That it has a really high price tag. And so for us, the trick is at that moment, at that critical moment, for us to be able to deploy an adequate amount of political incentive and disincentive, and backing it up with a little bit of armed force, right? Just a little bit of UN peacekeeping that's there, just as a guarantor of the peace to deter potential spoilers to the process. But if we can engage at that little sliver of it, then we have a chance of moving into these things. But it's when we fail at that, and the external spoilers are allowed to can mess stuff up, that I think peacekeeping is just like the wrong tool, and we tend not to do as well.
Well, you say political will as if it's separate from incentives, but they're connected, because you can provide incentives for political actors to strongly.
Yeah. No, and in fact, when we were in Bosnia, one of the reasons why we achieved the extent of the success that we did, to the extent we achieved success there.
And Bosnia is now up in the 60s somewhere.
Not bad, higher than the United States, right? One of the reasons why we did is because we had leverage over the parties. The High Representative had the ability to issue instructions to the parties and say, if you don't behave, you lose Brčko. If you don't behave, you could lose Mostar. These are things that the parties didn't want and would have made it difficult for them to win elections and be popular with their constituencies, so they had to play ball. So we had the ability to impact on political will. But getting external actors to be able to be willing to spend capital to generate that is really hard. Whether it's particularly with regards to the Security Council, because they're playing across the board. So getting them to focus, getting the French to focus on Eastern DRC is really hard. Right?
So just giving them numbers of where you rank on this index is not going to create political will.
No.
And how about the question of using it as a early warning tool, or does DPKO already have you have an operations room? I'm sure you can see things red and yellow every day.
Honestly, the problem with early, you asked is, the way you phrased the question initially is, has that moment passed?
Yes.
And I think it might have, unfortunately, or at least it's shifted. It's more of a different department. DPA does that stuff now. And the reason for us, I think, is that the council sort of has permanent attention deficit, right? You trying to get them to focus on anything is really, really difficult as well. This is a theme, right? That it's really quite hard to get the council, because You go in, right, and you write a report on Congo, and it takes you 3 months to write this report, and it's really detailed, and it involves information that's been collected on the ground from your human rights people, your CIMIC officers in the military, the mission political, information from things like Freedom House and everything else. And it takes 3 months, and you write this report. And the council has 2 hours to consider it in between talking about Somalia and Resolution 1325, right? And that's it. That's all there is. And the people who are considering Somalia and then 1325 after, with a lunch break in between, it's the same 15 people. Right? So it's not as if France is actually there. I mean, it isn't. It's that same. It's that one person plus the others that are moving out of the room, and it's that country. It's not the council. The council isn't a thing. It's a fiction. It's a polite fiction to say the council must. Right? So getting the council to focus on the missions that it already has authorized, and like in Congo. Or Haiti or Sudan or any of our other missions is really quite complex because these things are dynamic and they require a lot of attention. Getting them to focus on the fact that we're really worried about what's going on in Guinea is impossible. You can put it on their agenda. First of all, it'll get bumped. You'll need to put it on 3 times before they'll actually talk about it. And all they're going to do is send you away and say, come back in 3 months with another report. Because that's the architecture of the council with regards to peace and security is tell us when it's burning.
Very good.
Can I say a couple of words on prevention?
Yes, let's hear about prevention.
I think that's one of the things coming from this early warning side. I think that's if the time of early warning is past, I think the time for prevention has come. And but again, it's something that is very difficult to measure. Kenya this year, there was a lot of good work, and UNDP was quite involved in creating local and creating regional platforms, creating telephone hotlines, if their intentions to resolve that, and was very, very successful. It has not been reported in the media a lot, and it's very difficult to measure that. We know that these kind of programs cost us 5 million, and we know that the violence in 2007 after the elections cost some estimated 4 billion. But, I mean, these are the kind of things that we need to do more, but these are the kind of things that are also, I think, difficult to do, difficult to get support. We see there are more and more people who are buying into that, but then you have also the problem of the council and where the UN focuses on. Which country would like to be on a list that says you have in 1 year a problem? Do you want, I mean, this is a political problem of the UN, to sort of have a watch list of fragile countries. That will be something that, you know, it's more behind the scenes and it's difficult to invest in.
I know that the president of the Congo, he's very upset that we call his country fragile.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yet it's hard not to call it fragile.
Exactly, yeah. But I mean, it's also in a way a fair point from what he says, because we talk only about, and that comes back to the media, we talk only about negative things about the Congos. After the elections, the Congo had 50,000 voting stations, 50,000, in a size, the size of Europe, with no infrastructure. So we managed with the National Electoral Commission to pull that off. I came home on election day and switched the television on. What do I see? 2 minutes on BBC or whatever it was. Elections in Congo, very successful, hardly any incidents, historic landmark elections for the country. What do I see as an image? The one voting station in Bakongo that burns.